News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moskow.
Karen, we begin with the T word. In fact, we begin with two T words, tariffs and transitory. Yes, Fed Chair Jay Powell brought back the infamous transitory word. After leaving interest rates unchanged, Powell downplayed mounting growth concerns and the price hits that could be on the way from President Donald Trump's aggressive trade war.
It can be the case that it's appropriate sometimes to look through inflation if it's going to go away quickly without action by us, if it's transitory. And that can be the case in the case of tariff inflation. I think that would depend on the tariff inflation moving through fairly quickly, and it would depend critically as well on inflation expectations being well anchored.
Jay Powell's comments came along with median forecasts showing 2 interest rate cuts this year.
Well, Nathan, Powell's stance calmed financial markets. The S&P 500 climbed more than 1% for the biggest rally for any Fed day since July. On a special edition of Bloomberg Surveillance, we got this Fed reaction from Bloomberg Intelligence rate analyst Ira Jersey.
The market certainly took him as dovish. He wasn't hawkish by any stretch of the imagination. The one thing that I think is interesting is the dot plot. And, we thought that maybe the median dot would move down a little bit. It didn't. It stayed the same. So this is pretty unusual for the rate market to rally like it did when the Fed didn't move the dots.
That's Ira Jersey of Bloomberg Intelligence. On that surveillance special, we also heard from Bloomberg opinion columnist and former New York Fed President Bill Dudley.
Powell then came in and I think gave a pretty dovish performance in the sense that, we got this. We're in a good place. We can afford to wait. We'll see how it goes. We're going to get the job done. So he, I think, was pretty reassuring to people that this was all, quite manageable.
And Karen, as Fed officials and investors weigh the Fed's next move, President Donald Trump says the central bank should cut. In a post on Truth Social, the president said, quote, the Fed would be much better off cutting rates as U.S. tariffs start to transition their way into the economy. The Fed's next meeting, May 7th.
Well, Nathan, now let's get to the latest on the war in Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he's agreed to stop hitting energy assets as a first step toward a ceasefire with Russia. Zelensky spoke with President Trump on the phone yesterday. Christopher Smart is a former special assistant to the president under the Obama administration.
Both Russia and Ukraine appear to be ratcheting down their level of hostilities one notch in terms of a ceasefire that avoids energy targets. But there's a long way to go to get the two parties to agree to any kind of a longer-term solution.
Christopher Smart, now with the Arbroath Group, was a guest on Bloomberg's Balance of Power. A White House statement says President Trump agreed to work with Zelensky on finding additional air defenses for Ukraine. Trump also offered to help run Ukraine's electricity and nuclear facilities, saying American ownership would be the best protection for that infrastructure.
And Karen, President Trump's also talking about meeting face-to-face with China's president. He says he wouldn't mind a summit in June with Xi Jinping. The president discussed trade talks with China in an interview with Fox News this week.
We have our own discussions with President Xi of China, and he wants to get along also, and he's looking to get along, and we're looking to get along with him, and we will. We have a problem of trade where we have a very big imbalance with China.
The Wall Street Journal reported this week that the U.S. and China are discussing a birthday summit between Presidents Trump and Xi. Both leaders were born in June.
Well, Nathan, this afternoon, President Trump is scheduled to sign an executive order at the White House. Sources tell Bloomberg the president will formally direct Education Secretary Linda McMahon to dismantle her department and, quote, return education authority to the states. Josh Cowan with the Education Law Center says the Trump administration has already been hollowing out the agency.
Trump, Secretary Linda McMahon, the Musk Doge operation have sort of hollowed out the department on their own. There's some litigation behind that, sort of questioning whether that itself is even legal. But what's certainly true is that thousands of department staff have been laid off at this point, even preceding the order. And that's going to have the real material effect on kids and families across the country.
Josh Cowan with the Education Law Center. The Education Department was created by Congress and would technically need lawmakers' approval to shut down.
Karen, the White House is also doubling down on verbal attacks on federal judges, even after the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court issued a rebuke. Bloomberg's Amy Morris has the latest on that from Washington.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt says President Trump is now calling on the Supreme Court to take action.
The president has made it clear that he believes this judge in this case should be impeached, and he has also also made it clear that he has great respect for the Chief Justice John Roberts, and it's incumbent upon the Supreme Court to rein in these activist judges.
Levitt says the judge in question was appointed by President Obama. He was actually appointed by President George W. Bush and then promoted by Obama. Levitt says the White House does not have any flights planned specifically, but the administration will continue with mass deportations. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
And that's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Karen Moskow.
I'm Nathan Hager, and this is Bloomberg.